What's up, YouTube? So in today's video, we're gonna get into something that I know a lot of people want to know some information around, and that's how much do you get paid as a software engineer, especially if you live in the US. So what I'm gonna do is give a brief overview around how much software engineers get paid that live in the US. And if you're new to the channel, make sure you hit the subscribe button below. Also hit the like button, it definitely helps out the channel. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So in being a software engineer, most people who at least aspire to want to be a software engineer, or they consider themselves that they are a software engineer, they're usually going to fall into three categories. It's going to be someone who is either self-taught, or you went through a boot camp, or if not, you either went through some kind of educational route, as far as going to college and you have either a computer science degree or engineering degree or somewhere of the sorts. So the price range of how much you could get paid is pretty big. It depends on what type of companies you work for. So if you work for smaller companies, you get paid one amount, versus if you work for some of the FANG companies, then you get paid a completely different amount. So I'm gonna speak on the FANG companies first, because I know most people pretty much want to know. So if you work for some of the top FANG companies, honestly, I'm not the best person to give you the best advice on how much you'll get paid, but what I will say is you can go to levels.fyi, and here is where some engineers post how much they've gotten paid from working at some of these companies. And I think what they've done is taken the tally of everything and put it together, so you can see how much an engineer got paid in one lump sum package. In this lump sum package, you can see that some engineers will be ranked by level, and the levels will be pretty much the same as if you worked at some of these other smaller companies. And some of these other smaller companies, they just give you a specific title versus pointing you more so on a level. So L3 would be considered more so like a junior developer or junior engineer. Then you have level 4, level 5, level 6, and then level 7, and so forth from there if you go up any higher. The biggest thing is that some of the smaller companies or some of the older companies that's still around, some of these companies, you don't get the huge compensation package that you probably would get from Google or Facebook, Netflix, Amazon, some of those top tech companies. So for me, I've worked at some of the large companies as well as small companies, so I feel like I have a good gauge around how much you will get paid for the most part. Now granted, this is a couple of years ago for some of these older companies, so obviously salary could have changed drastically over time. Especially with some of the smaller companies, they're trying to kind of keep up with some of those larger companies to at least bring in new talent. So the big thing is with the large companies, obviously large companies are going to pay more, but that's only because of the fact that with those large companies, those interviews are much harder, and they're very picky around the talent that they bring in that they want to actually work for them. Now from this point forward, what I'm gonna be doing is pretty much going over some of the smaller companies and the larger companies. I kind of give like a brief overview around how much they get paid, but again, I will highly suggest you go to levels.fyi, and then you can just type in the name of the company you're looking at, whether it's Google, Amazon, Facebook, or what have you. They bring up a lot of the big name companies across the whole US. So if you're looking to come to the US, or you're moving to the US, or you're studying abroad out the country and you're trying to come back to the States, then you could go to levels.fyi, and they'll be able to go over everything for you around how much exactly you will get paid. Now the starters for the smaller companies. So for smaller companies, if you come in as a junior developer, say you graduate from a boot camp or computer science degree or whatever, honestly, I would say that 9 times out of 10, the salary you probably will be expecting will probably be between around 70 to 80K for the most part. Now some companies may pay you a little less, some companies may pay you a little bit more, but typically you're gonna pretty much stay in their like 70 to 80 range. Nowadays, some companies do pay more. So I've seen some people that graduate boot camps or just graduated college, and they're starting out with a base salary like around 90K, some starting like around almost 100K. So it just varies, and it depends on the company as well as, you know, your skill level or what you can bring to the table. Because the biggest thing is you really want to make sure you have the skills that you can bring forth to impact the company and impact the team that you're going to be joining. Now the next level here is where the range kind of drastically shifts a lot because the next level is more so a mid. So the first level I was talking about was a junior developer. So this is more so like an L3 at Google or some of those other tech companies. When you hit to mid-level, this level is where most engineers pretty much stay at for the longest, just being completely honest with you. It's hard for most engineers to go past this level because this level is where most of the knowledge is pretty much seen for the most part. But level L, which would be a L4 or a mid-level developer, most mid-level developers will pretty much sit in the pocket of a range, I would say probably around like 90K to some being like around 120K, somewhere around there. It's usually somewhere in between that ballpark for the most part. And that, like, again, that depends on the companies you work for. That depends on the knowledge that you have, or so forth. And it really depends on the impact that you are going to be bringing forward to the team. So if you're a mid-level developer or you're an L4, this is the level where you're not being handheld as much as you were being as a junior developer. At this point, your lead or whomever is over you will kind of give you more free range to kind of go through and just knock out whatever you need to as far as code changes, and you'll be able to take on more features and more tasks. Now, once you get past a L4 or a mid-level developer, this is where your range can go haywire. Just being honest, you can go from, honestly, like around 120 from, hey, I've seen people make 500K as a senior engineer, and a senior engineer would be like an L5 at Google. Now, again, like I said, these price ranges could be drastically different, because honestly, if you look at TikTok, everybody on TikTok will make it seem like everybody makes six figures. And hate to be the bearer of bad news, but just being honest, everybody that graduates from a boot camp or with an engineering degree or with a computer science degree or whatever, typically they're not going to just walk through the door and just immediately make 100K. That's just not how this works. And just being completely honest for that, it's just for the fact that, being perfectly honest, you don't know anything as of yet. When you graduate college, you probably think like, I've studied all these different materials. I know this and this and this. Yeah, but you haven't written a lick of code for an actual large enterprise company. And if you haven't written any code for an enterprise company before, you have no earthly idea, what type of code you should be writing. 9 times out of 10, if you take a junior developer and you throw him on a project and he's by himself and he's new, he or she rather, they're gonna probably write a bunch of spaghetti code, because you don't understand the fundamentals around how to write clean architecture code that can be built on top of over a long span of time. You also probably don't know as deeply as you probably think on how to refactor code and make things much easier for other developers. You're not going to think about the code that you write and how it impacts the entire application as a whole. That's where someone who has more of a senior level of knowledge, which is pretty much in the range where I'm at, they'll be able to see forth, things that will probably impact the code base a lot more. And from that point, coming out straight out of college, you're just not going to be there as of yet. So I would say, if anything, take your time. This is not a race by no means. Everyone goes through this journey as far as knowing absolutely nothing to being, senior to staff engineer, so forth. So just take your time with it. Again, the salaries I'm giving, they could range drastically depending on where you work. Also depending on where you live in the US, that's also a big thing. If you live in California, obviously California, cost of living is much, much higher, versus if you live somewhere, say in like Memphis, Tennessee, where the cost of living is nowhere near as high as California. So obviously an employer who's employing employees in Memphis wouldn't want to pay you this crazy amount of money and you're living in Memphis. Whereas if you work for a company that is based in California, yeah, them wanting to pay you 300K, 400K, as a salary makes sense, especially if you're going to be working remote for this company. But again, you need to just make sure you do your own due diligence, look into these companies you want to work for. I would highly suggest make a list of the companies you want to work for, and then try to see where you land in those companies, and go from there. Outside of that, I would just personally take your time, make sure you learn everything that you can, as well as just, look around what companies you want to work for. The other big thing I add on to this is make sure you try to see if you can work with a recruiter. See if they'll reach out to you versus you reaching out to them. If a recruiter reaches out to you, keep them as a great contact and let them know what you're looking for. And with their recruiter, again, don't try to see if you can just immediately make 100K coming straight out the gate. If you can find a job that's a good fit and the culture is great, as long as the offer isn't anything ridiculous where they're not trying to pay you practically anything, then, obviously look into that company, see if it's a good fit for you. Take the first offer you can get, especially if you're coming out of a boot camp. Well, I don't want to say the first offer, but take the best offer you can get coming out of a boot camp or coming out of college or anything like that, or if you're self-taught, and see how that works for you. Just because of the fact that, you need this first job just to get you experience so you can move forward to the next job. Now, if you come out the gate and you can get on that Google, hey, congratulations to you. But just being honest, that doesn't work out for everybody. So because of that, I would say, just make sure you do your own due diligence, practice for these interviews, study as hard as you can, and see how it works out. And hopefully, good and the best of luck to you. So with that, I want to thank you guys for watching the video. Also, again, like I said, just make sure if you're looking for the high tech companies, because I don't want to go into their salary because it's just crazy different. Make sure you go to levels.fyi and it'll go over the breakdown of how much those engineers get paid. Again, those interviews are much harder. You have to have a larger, extensive amount of knowledge as far as walking through the door through some of those companies. It's not just as simple as just acing some of these lead code questions and then just thinking you're going to just walk through, especially depending on the paradigm that you work with or code base you're going to be dealing with. You may have to have a little bit more extensive knowledge around different things and so forth. So that's pretty much it on that. And I just want to thank you guys again for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one.